Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I'm changing my message a little bit for you guys tonight. You know, one of the things that I like about Judaism, I should tell you after 42 years, I'll tell you what I like about Judaism. One of the things I like about Judaism is that it's ancient and it's modern at the same time. And what I mean by that is that you go back into biblical tradition or rabbinic tradition and you look at the ways the rabbis examine things, and it seems esoteric, kind of irrelevant, and then you open your eyes and you recognize how relevant it is. It's going to be self-explanatory what I'm talking about. I think a terrible tragedy happened this week, and I know people listen to news, watch TV, read it in newspapers. This execution of Marcellus Williams was a disgrace. He spent more than 2 decades in Missouri's death row, convicted in 1998 murder that he said he didn't commit. He died of lethal injection on Tuesday evening, as you know, after a very lengthy and complex effort to exonerate him based on DNA testing issues. And after 2 last-minute execution reprieves, starting almost 2 decades ago, there was kind of a momentum to go over, to kind of review some of the procedures and whatever. And the local prosecutor himself didn't want him to be convicted, wanted it to be opened up. He received, as you know, an outpouring of support from legal groups such as Midwestern Innocence Project and even from members of Congress. And the family of the victim in the 1998 St. Louis stabbing came to oppose Williams' execution. In late Tuesday afternoon, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to stay Williams' execution. And the court's 3 liberal members disagreed, and they said they would have granted the request to halt the execution. And in a statement after the High Court's decision, an attorney for Williams listed people who had opposed his execution and fought for his removal from death row, including the St. Louis County prosecutors who now, quote unquote, now admit they were wrong, zealously fought to undo the conviction and save Mr. Williams' life. I just want to go on a little bit more because it gets, as you know, Eric Greitens granted Williams a reprieve, and more than 1 million concerned citizens petitioned Governor Parson to commute Mr. Williams' death, as did 69 faith leaders in Missouri Muslim, Christian, Jewish communities. And there was doubt in what was his case. There was ambiguity. There was a possibility of a miscarriage of justice. And the governor was indifferent to this. And what he did was sinful. He should be ashamed of himself. Someday he'll meet his maker, and he'll have to answer for it. Now, why do I raise this issue? Because I think it's really important to understand the Jewish view of capital punishment. And I'm not advocating that we go to the Talmud or go to the rabbinic codes and just transfer everything over and that's it. But it is incredibly important that citizens of all religions, or no religion, understands how Judaism sees capital punishment, because it's a tremendous moral lesson. Now, interestingly enough, Judaism is not opposed to capital punishment. You look into the Torah, there are 36 different sins that you end up with execution. I know people, and then people say, then people say to me, I know in the Torah if I violate the Sabbath, I'm going to get stoned. That is in the Torah. No one takes that seriously. Forget about that. But I want you to understand how the rabbis understood capital punishment. Yes, it is defined and articulated in the Torah as a punishment for multiple offenses. But the rabbis of the Talmud were bold and ethically sensitive. And even though the Torah affirms it, the rabbis, in effect, make it impossible to impose it. This is how the renowned scholar, one of my teachers at the Jewish Theological Seminary, Rabbi Ismar Shorsh, he explains the intricacies of the Jewish laws in this matter, and I want to share with you how he understands it, because it's as clear as can be, and he brings together a lot of really important ideas. So, according to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is the first codification of law following the Torah itself, capital cases were to be tried by a court with no less than 23 judges, where civil cases needed only 3 judges. There were no juries in ancient Israel. The judges were the ones who made the decisions. And according to the tradition, whereas in every other in the civil case, 3 judges, you needed 23 judges. Capital cases allowed for no circumstantial evidence. Witnesses had to be carefully examined. They were required to know the accused personally, warn him or her beforehand not to commit the crime, and to see the crime committed with their own eyes. So basically, what would have to happen is, I know you wouldn't commit any bad crime, but I have to use you as an example, Glenn. So Glenn, you are about to do something terrible. Here's Joe over here, and you're about to kill him. And I'm going to say to you, Glenn, you have a knife in your hand. Do you know that if you take that knife and you kill Joe, it's a capital offense? And you'll say, what are you going to say to me? Yes, Alan, I know if I kill Joe, it's a capital offense. And then you say, but you're going to say, I'm going to do it anyway. That's witnessing in Jewish tradition. That's how hard it is. Once a testimony has been gathered and scrutinized, the judges were to take upon themselves the possibility of the defendant's innocence before they considered grounds for conviction. Conviction called for a majority of at least 2 votes and not just 1. And moreover, voting went by rank. So in other words, when you had these multiple judges, you started with the lowest level judge, the most inexperienced one. He gave his opinion because they didn't want they didn't want this judge to be intimidated by more mature judges. Once judges indicated that they leaned towards acquittal, they could no longer argue for conviction. Nor were the judges permitted to render a decision in undue haste. Before making a determination, they had to sleep on the case. And that is why capital cases were never heard on the eve of the holiday or on the eve of the Sabbath. Though decisions to acquit could not be overturned, a guilty verdict was always reversible. And most revealing of this is so interesting. And this is so counterintuitive, but if all the judges found the accused guilty, the defendant was to be immediately acquitted. Just think about that. Why? Because there was a concern, there was a rush to judgment. Justice turned on debate, and unanimity was there was always suspicion of unanimity. The Mishnah termed a court that executed a defendant once in 7 years as a wayward court. So in other words, Judaism was not against the death penalty, but it was so concerned that it would be brought forth or initiated in a way that's improper or dangerous. The rabbi said, in theory it's possible, but in reality it can never be possible, or so rarely possible that in effect we're against it. Now, why do I raise this issue? I raise this issue not because Missouri law should be based on the laws of the Sanhedrin in ancient Israel. I do raise it because Jewish law says that you have to go to the farthest extent possible you have to always assume that there's reason for acquittal. You have to go and go and go and go to the last minute. There was absolutely no reason for this execution not to be stayed and for this to go have further investigation. And that the governor didn't do the right thing is a moral disgrace. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm embarrassed to live in the state of Missouri, to be honest with you. I mean, have you been following this case? I mean, and I'm not saying there aren't issues here. I'm not saying they're not issues. But if you follow any of the restrictions, the spirit of Jewish tradition about how laws should be executed, there's something wrong here, my friends. And I think an innocent man died. And sin on all of us. Sin on all of us. Shabbat shalom.